National Tight End Day in Week 8 was absolutely huge. There were 16 touchdowns scored by tight ends in Week 8. A whopping 15 tight ends scored at least 10 fantasy points, and on the day, tight ends had 177 total receptions, a single-day NFL record. Now, I don't know about you, but I think every Sunday should be National Tight End Day. So let's go through my top 15 tight end rankings here for Week 9 fantasy football, but before we do, let's see some of my bigger hits and misses from the tight end position just last week. And when it comes to the hits, Cade Otton, Tucker Kraft, Mark Andrews all performed up to expectations, but I did have some pretty big misses. I'm sorry, but I don't think anyone on earth expected to get what we got from Adam Troutman last week. I had him ranked way too low, obviously. Tyler Conklin, he participated in National Tight Ends Day, but you know who didn't? Jake Ferguson, one of the only top-tier tight ends in the NFL that really couldn't get anything going last week. But enough of the past, let's go ahead and dive into Week 9 now, starting in Tier 1. And I don't know about you, but I'm feeling a little bit frisky, so in Tier 1, I put Travis Kelce, Brock Bowers, Cade Otton, David Njoku, and Trey McBride. Now, maybe it's a shock for some people that Travis Kelce is at the top of the list, but he finally found the end zone in Week 8. He participated in National Tight Ends Day, but this one right here is all about the matchup. Tampa Bay has been absolutely torched by tight ends here as of late. Look what Kyle Pitts even did last week. That defense is decimated with injuries. Now, DeAndre Hopkins may see a little bit more, but that's also going to open up things across the middle of the field for Travis Kelce. In a great matchup, I got him sitting right here at the top of the list. Then we go to Brock Bowers going up against Cincinnati, and the targets kind of dipped in Week 8. Now, Kansas City did great in limiting him. He still played 91% of the offensive snaps, though, and is averaging over 10 targets a game over his last 4 games. In a matchup going up against Cincinnati, who allows the 7th most fantasy points per game to tight ends, I got Brock Bowers right here at number 2. Then we go to Cade Otton going up against Kansas City, and the dude is absolutely exploding after all the injuries in Tampa Bay. Over the last 2 weeks of the season, he has a total of 20 targets, 17 receptions, 181 yards receiving, and 2 touchdowns. He is now the tight end 6 overall in fantasy football. We know teams cannot run against Kansas City. They're going to have to throw the football, and luckily, the Chiefs allow the 2nd most fantasy points per game to opposing tight ends, so Cade Otton's all the way up at number 3. Now, after Cade Otton, we got David Njoku of the Browns going up against the Chargers this week, and despite the takeover of Cedric Tillman here as of late, David Njoku still remains a top-tier tight end weekly in fantasy football. He's had at least 14 fantasy points now in back-to-back ball games, and the Chargers do allow 9 fantasy points per game to opposing tight ends. With Jameis Winston throwing more touchdowns in this offense than Deshaun Watson ever could, you have to think it only helps out David Njoku. Got him at number 4. Then we go down to Trey McBride at number 5, the last spot here in Tier 1, going up against Chicago. He's coming off his first 100-yard game of the season. He really showed that both him and Marvin Harrison Jr. can coexist in the same games here in Arizona. McBride is the current tight end 5 overall, but this Bears defense is no joke. But there is a little bit of a silver lining. Tight ends over the last few weeks have really been the quarterback safety blanket against this Bears defense. McBride may not rack up a ton of yardage, but could see a ton of opportunities and a ton of volume in this game. That's why I'm keeping him in Tier 1. So now let's transition down to Tier 2, where we have Kyle Pitts, Sam Laporta, Evan Ingram, Mark Andrews, and Jake Ferguson. For Kyle Pitts, he's going up against Dallas, and Cousins is absolutely doing it again. First, he unlocked TJ Hawkinson in Minnesota. Now he's finally unlocking Kyle Pitts in Atlanta. He's the tight end 4 on the season, averaging 9 fantasy points per game. Has at least 10 fantasy points in 3 of his last 4 games, though, and now a matchup going up against Dallas, who allows 10 fantasy points per game to opposing tight ends, and just got absolutely torched by George Kittle last week. Then we go down to Sam Laporta going up against Green Bay. And I guess it's obvious now that Jameson Williams is what was holding back Sam Laporta this season. With J-Mo not on the field, Laporta just had his best game of the year, 6 catches, 48 yards, and a touchdown. Now a matchup going up against Green Bay. They allow the 10th most fantasy points per game to opposing tight ends, and once again, no J-Mo. Then we got Evan Ingram going up against Philadelphia. With Gabe Davis, Christian Kirk, and Brian Thomas Jr. all hurting, there has to be an increased target share going the way of Evan Ingram, especially since they're going against Philadelphia and going to have to throw the ball. Philadelphia does allow the second fewest fantasy points per game to opposing tight ends, but they haven't faced a legit tight end in multiple weeks. Given all the injuries to the Jacksonville passing game and the amount of targets that could go the way of Evan Ingram, I kept him right here at number 8 in the middle of tier 2. Then we got Mark Andrews going up against Denver. And finally, Andrews gets hot, and then the team goes out and trades for Deontay Johnson. Now, it shouldn't play much of a factor this week, but it could in the future. As of right now, Mark Andrews' season high is only 66 yards, so that tells us he needs to score touchdowns, and he's done that. He has 4 touchdowns in his last 3 games, but now in a matchup going up against Denver, they allow only 8 fantasy points per game to the tight end position, so Mark Andrews is sitting at number 9. Then we go to Jake Ferguson going up against Atlanta, and he didn't benefit at all from National Tight End Day last week. The targets were there, but they're just little dump-offs, and a lot of them aren't even catchable. He's only averaging 3.8 yards per reception over his last 2 games, but this one right here is a good matchup going up against Atlanta. We just saw them get torched last week by Cade Otton. Hopefully Jake Ferguson can find the end zone this week, which is enough to get us through the first 2 tiers. So now let's go down to tier 3, where we have Tucker Kraft, TJ Hawkinson, Dalton Kincaid, Zach Ertz, and Hunter Henry. Now for Tucker Kraft, he's going up against Detroit, and man oh man, do we need Jordan Love to play in this ball game. If it's Malik Willis, we're probably going to have to drop Tucker Kraft even further down the rankings, but as of right now, he's the current tight end 3 overall on the season, but without Jordan Love, the ceiling is going to be so much more difficult to get, especially going against Detroit, who actually plays pretty well against opposing tight ends. They allow the fewest fantasy points per game to the tight end position. Now, after Kraft, we got the return of TJ Hawkinson in Minnesota going up against the Indianapolis Colts, and reports have already come out saying that he is not going to be on a snap count. Now, Indianapolis, they allow the 6th most fantasy points per game to the tight end position. Honestly, though, my biggest concern is Kirk Cousins is what fed TJ Hawkinson. Will Sam Darnold do the exact same thing? It's not like there aren't other weapons in this Minnesota offense to feed. So as much as I would like to throw TJ Hawkinson right up into the top 8 or so, let's see what that connection looks like between him and Sam Darnold before overreacting. Which then takes us down to Dalton Kincaid of the Buffalo Bills going up against Miami, and he just hasn't really been needed very much in this offense this year, with Keon Coleman taking a step forward, Khalil Shakir really being the binky to Josh Allen, and now that they've added Amari Cooper, and with James Cook killing it in the running game, Dalton Kincaid is really just nothing more than a low-end tight end 1 at best here this year. Then we have Zach Ertz going against the Giants, the current tight end 10 overall on the season, 8+ fantasy points in 3 straight games, coming off a season high in targets with 11. He had 4 receptions for 62 yards against New York back in week 2, and Jaden Daniels seems to be pretty healthy. He's just an overall solid floor play each week. And then lastly, here on the list, it's Hunter Henry going up against Tennessee, the current tight end 11 on the season. We know that Drake May is in concussion protocol. Now, because of that, if it is Jacoby Brissett, Hunter Henry becomes a little bit safer. He'll see more volume, could rack up more receptions, but the touchdown upside is going to be a lot less. In a matchup going up against Tennessee, they only allow 7 fantasy points per game to the tight end position, but at this point of the tight end rankings, everyone is basically a dart throw or a boomer bust play. Now that gets us through the top 15 tight ends, but like I said when we were talking about Hunter Henry, at this point of the rankings, it's all a dart throw, it's all a crapshoot, everybody's boomer bust. And really, there are 4 other tight ends that I could fit anywhere in that 13 to 15 range right now. So before there's people out there in the comment section saying I forgot about so-and-so or I'm disrespecting so-and-so, no, I'm really not. Guys like Cole Kmet, Dalton Schultz, Will Dissly, and Tyler Conklin are all guys that I could literally slot into that 13 to 15 spot in the ranking and really not have it change much. We've seen the ceiling of Cole Kmet at times, it's just hit or miss. How about Dalton Schultz, increased target share with no Nico Collins and Stephon Diggs? Will Dissly's been tearing it up here as of late, getting a ton of targets for the Los Angeles Chargers, and then Tyler Conklin is a guy who's going to see a touchdown opportunity every once in a while. So between those 4 guys and Dalton Kincaid, Zach Ertz, and Hunter Henry, they're all basically interchangeable. They all have similar floors and similar ceilings. Now, if that makes sense to you, do me a favor and hit the like button if you haven't already. But all right, that should wrap up our week 9 rankings. All 4 positions have been posted. So if you're looking for quarterback, running back, or wide receiver rankings as well, they're live on the channel right now. I wish you all the best of luck here for week 9 fantasy football. And then most importantly, on your way out, do your part to make the world a better place.
Analytics off the chain, all the channels not the same. Jake and Kyle, you know the name. Headliner Nation, we running the game.